The next stage is not about the madness of rock and roll or being married to somebody very famous, which of course has its own faults. I am free now because I'm not Mrs. Famous Eric, Mrs. Famous George. That's all over. That was in the past. Now I can be me.
Hello, I'm Catherine Fairweather and welcome back to the third act. My next guest is 4 times Vogue cover girl and former leading international model, Pattie Boyd. Now a photographer, Pattie is rock's most legendary muse, having married George Harrison of the Beatles and Eric Clapton. She recorded her colourful life in images and in a memoir, Wonderful Tonight, which depicts that for all the drama, turmoil, not to mention tremendous high, of the turbulent decades of her youth, she's remarkable for maintaining her groundedness and good sense. Delighted to welcome her back to Orions to catch up on the latest developments of her amazing life and career. Pattie, I don't think I've seen you for about 10 years. It's wonderful. Welcome to Orions, and thank you for coming. I'm sorry you couldn't bring your dog today.
Yeah, he's not a well dog, although you wouldn't know it. He's still behaving like a puppy. I have not told him he's got cancer.
Don't tell him. Maybe he doesn't need to know.
No.
You, in the last 10 years since I saw you, you've done so much. This year, after the sort of apocryphal start to the year when everyone thought you were dead, don't you remember some gossip columns announced your death? Were you aware of that?
Somebody mentioned it to me and I just laughed it off. I didn't know how far that rumour had gone.
Extraordinary. It was in a few papers, and it's wonderful to see you in 3 dimensions and very much hale and hearty.
Yeah.
And then you had this extraordinary Christie's auction, didn't you, in March? Tell us about that. Why did you decide to get rid of all your memorabilia and love letters from your husbands, Eric Clapton and George Harrison, and get shot of your photographs?
Well, the thing is, Catherine, after Eric and I split up, I didn't really have much money and I didn't know what to do. The only thing I really loved and still have a passion for is photography. So then I started looking through my archive to see what I had, collected quite a few, like 40 images, and then I had exhibitions around the world, starting in San Francisco, and then New York, and, I went as far as Australia and Kazakhstan and extraordinary places, and Bahamas, all sorts of amazing places. But then each time I'd have to have an exhibition, which was very nice and kind of them to invite me. Of course, what goes with it is lots of press interviews. So I end up telling the same old stories that were beginning to bore me.
Of course.
And I thought, oh God, when I can afford to, I will stop doing this. And then I thought, how can I make some money? Because it was beginning to worry me. And I thought, I know what, I will sell this lovely painting of Layla that Eric gave me. And then my girlfriend said, oh, have a look around and see what else you have. So we amalgamated all these things, all these objets of interest, letters and songs and clothes from the 60s, huge amount of items. And Christie's were absolutely thrilled to be the auctioneers for the job. I went to all the auctioneers to sort of see how interested they were, and Christie's won out. And they did a remarkable job, I think.
And the sales were extraordinary. They far exceeded the Christie's estimates. Millions you made.
I think in an auction, people get very, very excited. I think it must be a sort of feeling that gamblers get as well, where you just can't stop. You want it and keep bidding.
What do you think that's about? Is it a pure old-fashioned rock and roll glamour, which people are longing to have a little piece of, or is it nostalgia for a past era, or is it just fame?
I think it's a combination. I think it's definitely a nostalgia for a past era, but also accompanying that is the romance. And there's very little romance nowadays, I think, because of the internet. It's sort of dulled most things down. And romance is one of the emotions that has been dulled down, I think.
I think you're so right. And that particular poignant item in this cache that was sold really affected me was when you describe in this Wonderful Tonight book, which is the story of your life and your marriages, you describe Eric Clapton writing you manic letters all the time. And on one particular occasion, he's sequestered in Wales, I think, and he doesn't have any paper, and he tears a sheet out of my favourite book of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, and he writes a beautiful love letter to you. And I think in the sale, that went for £120,000.
Now, you see, I thought that was amazing.
Amazing.
But you see, also, I mean, I don't know if Eric's upset that I sold them. I'm not really too sure. However, if he is, he shouldn't be, because I'm allowing everybody to see what a very creative man he is, what a beautiful writer. His handwriting is exquisite. So I'm showing another part of him, not just the guitar player and songwriter.
A romantic.
He is a romantic.
Absolutely romantic. And as you say, the art of letter writing is long gone with technology.
No, you see, it gives another dimension to a language that you trying to put across to somebody. Music does it, but there's something about letter writing, which I think, because you see, if you're a graphologist, you can see how that person is really thinking and feeling when they're writing, depending on where the handwriting is sloping, or, a big Y or a small, all of that is telling you something about the writer.
I agree, and I was also thinking that you've drawn a line under this very, very important part of your life that defined you for so long, and maybe now you want to move on, or you want to wave it goodbye.
I do want to wave it goodbye, because in a way it's been holding me back from progressing and jumping into the next stage. The next stage is not about the madness of rock and roll or being married to somebody very famous, which of course has its own faults. I am free now, because I'm not Mrs. Famous Eric, Mrs. Famous George. That's all over. That was in the past. Now I can be me.
And Pattie, do you think selling this stuff finally makes you feel as free as ever? I mean, as you ever could be? Does it feel very symbolic, this release of...
No, not really, because you see, I know and I'm aware that those beautiful letters were written for me. So it's something I will never, ever forget. Because I don't physically have them to hand, doesn't mean they've gone, because they're still in my head.
Of course, and of course, you record them in this wonderful book, this memoir of your life. When did that book come out? It was about 2015, wasn't it?
I think so.
And it was after a long period of time that you felt ready to write about your marriages and your life.
Yeah. When I started seeing George, I remember Brian Epstein would say to me and the other girlfriends, women, never talk to the press. So I felt a real heel when I was talking to Penny Junior, with the idea of writing this book. So many people had asked me if I would write a book, and I'd always said no, because I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to think about my past. I hadn't digested it properly, totally, mentally, spiritually, in every way. I hadn't completely digested it. So the time had to be right for me to think of writing a memoir, because you have to go back over times that were painful, and if they haven't been properly processed, you can't do it.
So true. And what was that moment when you felt strong enough and had enough of a sense of yourself to do it? What stage were you at in your life then when you felt, I know who I am and I can write this book?
When I was flailing around, also seeing a psychotherapist for a bit of help, and I found all these envelopes and boxes with great photographs and negatives in them. And one envelope in particular was so exciting because I'd written on it, Gary Brooker in Poland. Gary Brooker was a singer in Procol Harum. I thought, oh, Gary in Poland. I remember going with him. How sweetly they were. They invited me to go with them. And I opened up the envelope. Gary wasn't there at all, but the Beatles were there. So, oh my God, I'd completely forgotten I had these images. How nice. And then, of course, when I had my first exhibition in San Francisco, I was unbelievably nervous. For some reason, I thought people would be very angry with me for showing such private photographs. And then there was such a wonderful reply, and people loved the exhibition. It went down terribly well. Lots of the photographs sold. And it gave me a feeling that I've done it on my own.
That must have been heady.
It really was. So I was waiting with a couple of friends upstairs on the first floor, with the staircase going down into this glorious gallery. And then this man, it was a security man, came upstairs. And he said to me, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he pulled his jacket open, his sleeve. "Pattie Boyd is coming down now." And I thought, whoa, that's it. I've made it. I'm not Mrs. blah, 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 And it was that was heady. And all these people wanting to meet me. And I didn't know anyone even knew of me. Do you know, I felt I was so hidden.
And it seems to me when I read that book, so much of your life, your early life, was this sort of shadow play between having too much attention for a young girl who was a fledgling, personality hadn't been formed yet, and you got all this attention. And you said, when it's all about your looks, it leaves you with a gaping hole in your confidence because it's so based on the way you look. Right?
Absolutely.
And then also in your childhood, where you were not seen by your parents, you sort of benign neglect, wasn't it? Maybe not even very benign, but your father disappeared, your stepfather was a bully, and your mother was juggling 5 children and trying to make some money. Terrible.
Yes, terrible. It was all very difficult. And for me, being the eldest of 6 children, I, of course, was sent to boarding school, and my brother was as well.
At 6, I think he was
No,
sent
6,
to
7, yeah, in Nairobi, in East Africa. And it did teach me 2 things that I will never forget, and that is independence and insecurity. So I've always been insecure, but even if I'm in a relationship, I want to be independent because I don't want to be let down.
Yeah.
Because I felt my parents obviously had let me down. I wasn't expecting anything, but I suppose you as a child automatically need your parents to look after you.
Of course, it's human.
Yeah. So those 2 opposing feelings still remain with me.
So that feeling of insecurity still exists in you, even in your 9th decade?
No, now I've got over that. I have to admit. Yeah, it's nice to shake that one off.
Yes, that's maybe one of the bonuses of getting older is suddenly feeling you don't have to prove yourself to it.
Absolutely. And this is tremendous freedom.
Let's go back to your beginnings, actually. You were brought up one of 5 children in Kenya.
One of 6 children,
One of 6 children.
Yeah, brought up... I was born in Somerset, in a little village in Taunton. And then when I was about 4 years old, we moved to Kenya, where my grandparents had a most lovely, sprawling house and beautiful gardens. Because my grandfather was in the British Army and they lived in India. Couldn't bear the idea of coming back to cold England. So they moved to Kenya. And so we stayed with them for quite a while. It was fantastic. It was so beautiful. And so the matured gardens and lawns gradually went out into wilderness. There were no fences anywhere. And then occasionally you'd see what was a tree is now not a tree at all. It's a giraffe walking in your direction. And, animal life was kind of unexpected, but it was all there. It was in the air, in the atmosphere, and it was exciting. I loved being there. But I never really knew where my mother was. She was always so sort of absent. And I would go to boarding school. And then, of course, one half term, I was allowed out, and there's Mummy, how divine. And she said, "Darling, I'd like you to meet your new father." And I looked at this man and shook his hand, thinking, what is Daddy going to say about this? Of course. And then back to boarding school. Thank goodness my father picked me up at the end of term. So this is all still a mystery to me.
I mean, it's a miracle you emerged as unscathed as you seem to be sitting in front of me. I mean, that kind of childhood, ricocheting around, never being told anything, with a mother who was so absent. You're a kind of survivor. How do you credit your survival? What is it about you? You said independence. So was it this fighting spirit that you had from an early age that kept you going through this sort of fairly chaotic childhood?
Yeah, I think so. Because it couldn't have made me hard, because I'm not a hard person. But it gave me sort of protective skin, I think.
And then your siblings were like your children in a way, weren't they?
They were, and I wanted to protect them always. So even as a 10-year-old, I wanted to protect them. So I didn't want to tell them all sorts of things. Or I pretended I knew more than I really did.
Mm. Are they still around, your siblings?
One sister died. She was very naughty. She was far too greedy. Yes, poor Paula. She wanted to drink all the time and take drugs all the time. And she realised what a burden she was to everybody in the family. And anyway, so she has 3 children. I'm very close to them.
Good.
Yeah.
Because that in the book at one stage, I know you talk about the other hurdle of being a woman and marriage was motherhood, and whether or not that made you feel seen or less seen, because motherhood was something everyone had to do, and you felt at the time that you hadn't achieved that goal.
Well, it was part of being a woman that you would, and I used to think that, of course, it will happen. This is being a woman. Naturally, you produce babies. And then I started panicking by the time I was with Eric. What's happened? I did have a few tests, obviously, and then we did IVF. And when I realised that I wasn't going to naturally have children, Eric didn't want to adopt, I thought, I've got to get a grip of this, because it's not going to happen. I don't want to push it. I don't want to bang my head against a brick wall, because this is it. I just have to swallow this particularly bad pill. And that's it. It's part of life.
And that's very sanguine of you and philosophical. I think you and the Beatles were all very wedded to the idea of mysticism at the time, weren't you? Were you helped by your belief in the mystic? Or?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I started meditating before the Beatles did, and then they met Maharishi and we all went to India. And Maharishi would give endless talks, and special talks for us as a small group. And his words of wisdom were quite incredible. Don't ask me to repeat any because I can't remember. But, when you hear incredible words from somebody you revere, they stay in your mind even if you can't open that particular box and draw them out. They're there, they become part of you. I think because of that, his teachings must have given me the strength to realise that, if something's not meant to happen, it's not going to happen. That's it.
Good for you. And years of therapy, or not that much therapy, but you did have a bit of therapy after Eric, I think, didn't you?
Yeah.
To get you back on your feet again.
Well, I didn't know who I was if I wasn't Mrs. Famous. I really didn't know.
And was it the camera that also helped as well as your therapist?
Most definitely. Because I'd even forgotten that. I'd forgotten I could take photos. And I'd forgotten what a passionate feeling it is when you pick up the camera and look through the lens. It's like, it's exciting. I'm looking for that shot. So there's a purpose, there's a reason.
And the creative spirit of you, which was obviously in evidence, also it came through in your creation of gardens and homes and cooking, didn't it?
Yeah.
Was that not enough to make you have a sense of yourself during your marriages? This brilliant cook that you obviously were.
No, well, when I was married to George, I used to love. We became vegetarians, and I loved making great salads and pastas and all sorts of things. Then he met Ravi Shankar, who he was just mad about because he wanted to learn how to play sitar. And then he met Ravi's nephew, who actually then moved in with us. And all George wanted to do was eat his Indian food, which made me redundant.
Pattie.
I should have thought, oh, God, nice, I've got lots of time to do something else.
Yeah.
But no, I was, just like, this is really unfair.
So, what about Eric? Did he appreciate your cooking?
No. Well, he did. He liked the idea of me chopping away in the kitchen. But by the time I got him the food, he would always be a bit drunk. So he didn't really like to sit in the dining room or the kitchen.
He paced.
He would just eat whatever he wanted, then go off and go and play his guitar.
So not very satisfactory.
No, it's like being with a child, really.
Well, this supposed life of incredible glamour was, in fact, again, you struggling with not being seen enough because they were doing other things, either communing with the mystics or playing their guitar too much. But you were the inspiration and the so-called muse in this changing world of womanhood and what it means to be a woman. Is it still great to be defined as a muse, do you think? Do you cherish that?
I'm very flattered by it. I never really thought about it until, I started doing these interviews. It didn't occur to me. I just thought, oh, that's nice. Eric's written a few songs about me. That's so nice. Didn't think any more. You see, until it's put into words and people make a big deal about it, then I became rather shy and couldn't believe that, it became something else bigger than I thought it was.
And I suppose it must be quite a lot to live up to as well, being someone's muse.
Yes. They see that made me insecure.
Yeah.
Having to live up to that. Yeah. And then I think, oh, God, I must put my makeup on every single day in case somebody sees me without makeup and they're going to think, God, she's a bit ugly, isn't she? How come songs were written about her? Do you know, I got into that stupid, insecure headspace.
And it was your sort of innocent, ingenue, down-to-earth charm of you in those pictures that was so appealing. I could see exactly why they were all fell at your feet. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Looks are wasted on youth, aren't they?
I know.
If only we knew how gorgeous we were when we were 20.
Yeah, but wouldn't we become nightmares?
We would be nightmares.
Oh my God, we walk around with a mirror in front of us.
Yeah. What would you tell your 20-year-old self now that you, looking back on your 21-year-old self, what do you wish you knew then that you know now? I
wish that I had held on to my passion and not be swayed to be living someone else's life with them. I think we have to know what it is that we love being involved in and hang on to it.
Very, very true. And I suppose back then it was difficult for women because we were defined
by our men.
Yeah.
Yes.
And our looks.
Yes, exactly. It was also vacuous and, when you look back, I think now, God, why didn't I study philosophy or medicine or something proper, something real?
And your mother's generation was all they were prepared for was the marriage market, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Poor little things.
So things have improved, haven't they?
Yes.
In some ways.
Yeah, women are getting stronger.
What do you make of Me Too?
Well, I do understand it, But what I don't understand is why women are unable to stand up for themselves.
Because our generation learned how to do that, didn't
Well,
we?
absolutely. Anybody coming on to you, just piss off. You know, instead of like, oh dear, poor me. Oh no, he's coming on to me. I mean, get a grip, you know, be bold, be brave.
Don't make yourself a victim.
Yeah. I suppose it's all right for me to say that now, and maybe if you are a slight victim, but you see that can also start from childhood. Who knows what their home life is like?
But you knew, even when you were a young thing, how to sort of fend off unwanted attention from all those alpha men. By just telling them no, or by just
just turning
batting
around,
them
or
off.
pretending I didn't understand, or walk away, or
And you were never in a position where you felt compromised, particularly.
no. Lucky me, I wasn't. But you see, also I met George when I was 19, and I started modelling at 18. And then I think people thought, oh well, if she's going out with George, then they wouldn't try anything.
And they didn't?
No.
God, you were so young. 20 when you married him, or 21 when you married him?
21.
And married for 10 years.
Yeah.
And that was the swinging 60s, when London felt like it was bursting out of all its boundaries and you could be anything, do anything. Did it really feel like that, looking back? Or did
it did.
It did, and
I
it was.
felt everything was possible. And everybody's beginning to look glorious. Men were growing their hair long, which was very attractive. And they started wearing wonderful shirts and velvet jackets, you know, and then the girls were wearing wonderful, like, sometimes 1940s chiffony, fabricy dresses, and the dresses started getting shorter, or they got very long. And there was a lot of colour, I seem to remember. Because I think previously we were still rather grey. Well, we were meant to wear what our mothers wore, which was low-shaded colours.
And pearls and twin sets.
Twin sets and pearls.
And dukes were suddenly going out with sort of hairdressers, or the other way around.
Yes. So the class barrier was breaking down. And it seemed as if all the successful photographers were from the East End or Ireland, or from, you know, working class backgrounds. And my brother, one of my brothers who wanted to become a photographer, managed to sort of try this Cockney accent. It was so awful because he thought it would bring him success. Of course it didn't, because he spoke about things being off. so it didn't work.
And did the rock and roll lifestyle, or the modelling lifestyle that you had, it really was fun. Looking back on it, what was the best thing about that era for you?
Hiding from the real me. Because being shy, you see, was agony. But being a model made it all better, because I could be someone else. And also with wearing all these great clothes, or sometimes really hideous clothes, I was never me. I was always someone else. I'd do different makeup, or I'd wear a black wig, or hair pieces, you know, and making modelling movements was certainly not the way I would be, you know, without these clothes and without this makeup. So this other persona emerged that loved the camera and loved wearing these clothes. So that's why it was fun.
So you could hide your shyness behind that. And then did you hide your shyness behind the camera as well? People always say that the camera is something you hide behind if you're a photographer. Was that a shield as well you could hide behind?
That was a protector.
Protector.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was in charge. I was in control. And I remember one time taking photographs of people's children for them. And it's very interesting to photograph a bunch of children from the same family, and there'd always be one child who understood what I was looking for and do a kind of pose. Very interesting. The others would just be children of floppy, and I'd say, sit here, stand, whatever. But there'd always be one who would look directly into the camera. Interesting.
Yes, that sort of chemistry, or one person being able to interpret somebody else's thoughts.
What I was trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. you say your life is now not about, it's so lovely to have a life away from the rock and roll, and you put that behind you, you've drawn a line under it. What gets you up in the morning, actually? What do you look forward to?
I look forward to checking on my vegetable garden and my plants.
Here not in London?
No, in West Sussex.
Mm-hmm. You're a country girl.
Yeah. And I don't know, something will happen. Either it'll be in a dream or a magazine, and then I'll be inspired to try to cook something that I've never cooked before. You know, I mean, I was at the Garden Museum yesterday and I picked up this cookbook by the Garden Museum chef. And I just opened it up at this page. For some reason, gooseberries had been in my mind. Why? I don't know. Then, here is this recipe for skate with mashed cooked gooseberries and sunflower sitting on top. And I thought, I have to make that. That sounds so amazing.
And Pattie, so imagine this is your last supper and you were cooking for your friends and you were putting on some music and inviting the people that have meant something in your life, or the people you haven't met and have been your heroes and heroines. Can you think of who you'd have around that table and what you would serve them?
Oh my God, that's a tall order. I'm nervous just thinking about it. I wouldn't be able to sleep for days worrying about the menu.
Yeah, that's why I didn't ask you earlier. I threw it at you because it is a worrying thought. What would one serve?
What would one serve? Then also, I'm very keen on sourcing certain foods, you know, so I must have the very, very finest cheese. I go to the best cheese shop that I know, you know, and etc. And the top fishmonger and all those things are important to me, particularly in this instance, as you were talking about, you know, the best supper.
And the way you lay the table.
Yes. Yeah. Which flowers? Tall flowers, short flowers, you know, objects on the table or not. You know, all those things.
Okay, well, let's think of your guest of honour. Who would it be? You don't need to have met him.
No, I'm thinking, let me think. I would like a philosopher.
Which one?
I would have Pythagoras. That's who I would have. Now, Pythagoras was the most interesting person because he understood colour and the relationship between colour and music.
Did he?
Yeah, I mean, he was amazing. I would definitely have him, and I'd have no one else. I would be his only audience. Because everyone else would interfere, you see, asking him questions.
A one-to-one with your Pythagoras Last Supper, where you could get all the answers to everything.
That would be it. That would be it for me. I'm sorry to sound such a selfish bitch, but they, you know...
You'd want him all for yourself.
You've asked me, yes, this question.
And what music would you have playing then for Pythagoras so that he could explain the colour principle to you perfectly?
I think something classical and not too interfering. So it would only be there as a sort of like background music.
Yeah.
Not as inspiration.
No.
Just as a mood.
Yeah.
Mood music.
That's right, I think.
Yeah.
So now, here you are, clean page, third act. What next for Pattie Boyd? Are we going to get another wonderful book from you?
I don't know. I was thinking I want to take some rather serious photographs when we go to Guatemala in November. I've never been there before, but apparently it's full of Mayan temples.
Yeah.
It's very ancient and beautiful, beautiful waters, and I think it might be a nice little something to do.
And might that lead to an exhibition?
I don't know. I don't know.
The world is still your oyster.
Or maybe a little book of photographs of Guatemala.
Whatever it is, Pattie Boyd, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I can't wait to see what you do next. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks, Catherine. That was fun.
That was fun. If you've enjoyed listening to today's show, you can hear more episodes by clicking follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to this, or by looking for the Third Act podcast in your favourite search engine. This episode was produced by Pete Norton and made possible by Orions, luxurious residences that are redefining later living in the heart of Chelsea.